Welcome back. Find a comfortable position and let your body get heavy. Take a slow breath in and let it out. There's nothing you need to do right now. Know where you need to be. Tonight I have 10 stories for you. Let them wash over you. You don't need to follow along closely. Just let the words carry you. Let's begin. I remember the evening light filtering softly through the window, casting long shadows across the wooden floor of my little apartment. The quiet hum of the refrigerator in the background was a constant companion as I stood in the kitchen, arms folded across my chest, savoring the moment of stillness. Rain pattered gently against the glass, creating a soothing rhythm, each drop tracing a different path as if they were all engaged in a private dance. The aroma of freshly brewed chamomile lingered in the air, mingling with the faint scent of the lavender candle flickering on the table, filling the room with warmth that felt just right. Outside, the world had begun to soften into dusk, the sky a gentle gradient of purples and soft blues, while inside, the light from a single lamp illuminated the pages of a book that lay open on the counter. It was a novel I had read too many times to count, its worn spine a testament to the quiet hours I'd spent lost in its pages. I often thought of it as a friend, one that welcomed me into its embrace whenever I needed solace. That evening, I had planned to spend some time with my thoughts, perhaps revisiting a chapter or two. But the sound of the doorbell interrupted my reverie, a soft, tentative chime that echoed through the silence. I glanced at the clock on the wall, surprised to see that it was already nearing 7. I wasn't expecting anyone. I hesitated for a moment, casting a curious glance toward the door. With a gentle exhale, I made my way across the room, each step a quiet exploration of the moment. I opened the door to find Leah standing there, her bright smile illuminating the dusk like a small sun. She was a friend I had come to cherish, quiet yet striking in her own understated way, with a wild flurry of curls that framed her face softly. Today, she wore a cozy, oversized sweater that seemed to envelop her in warmth, like a blanket on a chilly night. "Oh, hi," she said, her voice a soft melody, almost drowned out by the sound of the rain. "I hope I'm not interrupting. I thought I might stop by for a bit if that's okay." Of course," I replied, stepping back to let her in, my heart fluttering just slightly at the unexpected delight of her company. The door clicked shut behind her, sealing out the cool, damp air, and just like that, the entire room felt even cozier. As Leah stepped inside, she paused for a moment, taking in the atmosphere. The candle's flickering glow, the enticing smell of chamomile, and the scattered notebooks that covered the table. "You've created quite the peaceful haven here," she remarked, tilting her head slightly, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "Just something I like to do," I said, feeling a shy smile form at the corners of my mouth. "Care for some tea?" "I have a bit left." "My." "Yes, please," she replied, her voice still light, like a feather drifting on the breeze. She moved to the small table, brushing her fingertips along its surface, her touch leaving a trace of thoughtful wonder. As I busied myself with the kettle, I could hear her murmuring to herself, something about how she loved the way the light danced across the floor. I turned my head and caught her gaze. She looked up with a grin, almost sheepish, as if she'd been caught in a delightful moment of daydreaming. I couldn't help but smile back, feeling a warmth that swelled gently in my chest. We settled into the familiar rhythm of conversation, each of us sharing small snippets of our lives, curious observations about books we loved, the quirky little habits we noticed in the people around us, and even the weather's temperamental moods. Weiss. There was a comforting cadence to our exchanges, every pause filled with an understanding that was quietly profound. The rain continued to tap against the window, a constant backdrop that seemed to encourage our quiet musings. As the minutes slipped by, I felt the atmosphere enveloping us, wrapping around our words like the softest of blankets, creating a cocoon where thoughts could unfurl gently, without fear of judgment. Every laugh from Leah felt like a secret gift, and I cherished the moments of silence in between, knowing that in this stillness, something special was taking root. At one point, I glanced outside. The world beyond was blurred by the rain, lights reflecting in puddles that formed on the pavement. The scene was almost otherworldly, and for a breath, I turned back to Leah, hoping she would be as mesmerized by it as I was. She caught my gaze, and for a heartbeat, the space between us felt charged with unspoken words, a softness that hinted at something tender. "You know," I began, my voice barely above a whisper, "sometimes I feel like this evening is just about perfect." "I know what you mean," she replied, her tone drifting like leaves on the wind. Her eyes held mine for a moment longer, the soft glow of the lamp casting a gentle light across her features. It was a quiet moment that seemed to stretch infinitely, woven with the threads of our shared understanding. As the evening deepened, I could sense that in the simplest of interactions, we were unwittingly sharing pieces of our hearts. There was a gentleness in the way she spoke, and I could feel the energy of our connection grow, like a tiny flame flickering steadily in the quiet. After we finished our tea, we shifted our attention back to the book that lay open on the table. It was a rich world of words, and I began to read aloud, my voice a soft companion to the sound of the rain. Leah leaned in closer, her presence warm and solid beside me, and I could feel the heat radiating between us, a shared cocoon of comfort that felt more significant than I had known. I noticed the way she settled into the moment, her eyes closing briefly as she listened, her soft breath syncing with the cadence of the words. I found myself losing track of the sentences, caught in the rhythm of her presence, the absolute tranquility of our shared quiet. It was as if we had created a small sanctuary where the outside world faded away entirely. And then, as the chapters gently unfolded, I became aware of the night deepening around us, the rain's relentless song now a lullaby, inviting the world to rest. I stopped reading for a moment, allowing the weight of silence to linger, and I glanced at Leah. Her eyes were still closed, a look of contentment resting on her features. The room felt enchanted, filled with a softness that wrapped around us like the most delicate fabric. And in that moment, I found myself reflecting on how easily we fit together, like two pieces of a puzzle that had always been meant to connect. The gentle stirrings of uncertainty that sometimes filled my mind began to fade, replaced by a warm understanding that whispered reassurance. "Are you falling asleep?" I asked quietly, a playful smile creeping onto my lips. Slowly, she opened her eyes, a laugh bubbling up, soft and melodic. "Maybe just a little. Your voice is quite soothing." "Mine." "I'll take that as a compliment," I replied, feeling my heart swell. "It's the book, really. It's doing all the heavy lifting." "Nay, Deline." The corners of her mouth curled into a smile, and I realized how beautiful it was. This shared moment, this quiet laughter, the depths of our connection. The world outside faded further into the background as we settled into the tranquility of each other's company, time slipping away like water through our fingers. Eventually, as the hour grew late and the rain slowed to a gentle drizzle, I found myself gathering the courage to speak the words that had echoed in the silence of my heart. "Leah," I began, my voice steady yet filled with a warmth that felt like a tender embrace. "I really enjoy spending time with you." Her eyes met mine, and I could see the understanding reflected back at me. "I feel the same," she said softly, a blush creeping into her cheeks. And just like that, the barriers that had held us back seemed to dissolve, replaced by a quiet understanding that wrapped around us like a warm shawl, keeping the chill of the world at bay. It was in that moment that I sensed the connection deepen even further, as if the rain had washed away the tension of uncertainty, leaving only the soft glow of companionship. As the evening continued to drift, we found ourselves lost in more stories and laughter, the unhurried rhythm of our exchanges, a testament to a newfound intimacy. We spoke of dreams and aspirations, of silly habits and secret fears, weaving a tapestry of understanding that felt beautifully intricate and yet so simple. I realized how easy it was to share my thoughts with her, to unwrap the layers of my heart and let them float in the soft light of our conversation. The rain continued to murmur outside, the world growing softer still, and in the gentle glow of the lamp, everything felt just right. It was as if time had paused for us, creating a little pocket of wonder and warmth where we could simply exist together, free from the hurry of life beyond these walls. As I glanced at the clock, I knew that it was almost time for her to go. Yet I found myself wishing for moments like this to stretch on, forever if possible. But I also understood that in the quiet of the night, surrounded by the soft patter of rain, we had created something truly special. When she finally stood to leave, her soft sweater brushing against my arm as we exchanged just the gentlest touch, it felt both like an ending and a promise, a reminder that moments like these could return if we simply allowed them space to. Breathe. I should get going, she said, her voice a gentle whisper, the corners of her mouth lifting into that warm smile that had become so familiar to me. But tonight was lovely. Thank you for having me. Now, he. The pleasure was all mine, I murmured, a peaceful smile spreading across my face, my heart still warm from our shared moments. I opened the door for her, and the cool air rushed in, filled with the fresh scent of rain-soaked earth as she stepped outside. With one last glance back, she said softly, I look forward to next time. As she walked away, her silhouette fading into the night, I stood in the doorway for a moment, breathing in the quiet stillness, the world illuminated softly by street lamps reflecting off the wet pavement. Once I closed the door, I returned to my cozy haven, the aromatic remnants of chamomile lingering in the air. I settled back into the gentle glow of the lamp, surrounded by the comforting ambience of the evening. In that moment, everything felt right. There in the dim light, I let my thoughts drift, feeling gratitude for the connection we had forged in the quiet space of our shared introversion. I knew then that in our gentle, unhurried way, we were creating a kind of love that didn't rush, but instead grew softly, like the dawn breaking after a long night. The rain continued its lullaby, and as I nestled onto the couch, wrapping myself in a warm blanket, I felt the remnants of our evening wrap around me like a soft embrace. With a smile tugging at my lips, I closed my eyes, surrendering to the comfort of the moment, knowing that tomorrow would bring new stories and perhaps even deeper connections. The world felt manageable now, filled with kindness and subtle joys. And I drifted into a peaceful sleep, carried away by the calming sound of rain on the roof, echoing the warmth of a connection that had only just begun. Take a deep breath and let's move on to the next one. The rain fell softly against the window, forming delicate rivulets that wandered down the glass like tiny streams. I sat cozily at my kitchen table, a steaming mug of chamomile tea cradled in my hands, the warmth seeping into my palms and spreading through me like a gentle hug. The scent of fresh bread lingered in the air, the aroma a reminder of the loaf I had baked earlier in the day, its crusty exterior giving way to the fluffy interior I savored with each bite. The world outside was blurred, the soft gray of the sky wrapping everything in a calm, muted embrace. With the dim light from the table lamp casting a warm glow around the room, I felt sheltered from the bustling world outside. In the corner, my cat Oliver was curled up on a nearby chair, purring softly, his round face relaxed in a deep, contented sleep. Sometimes it seemed as if he showed me how to find solace in simplicity. I took a sip of my tea, feeling the heat against my lips, and inhaled the sweet, calming scent that perfumed the air. Everything felt just right in that moment, a pocket of peace in an otherwise busy life. Earlier that day, I had made a decision that weighed on my heart like a heavy stone. I had finally chosen to step away from a job that once brought me joy, but had slowly morphed into something darker, an obligation that choked my spirit. It had been difficult, a small part of me questioning whether I was making the right choice. But as I sat in the gentle embrace of that rainy afternoon, I knew I had to trust myself. The thought fluttered through my mind like a fragile leaf caught in the wind. Trusting myself was a new skill I was still learning to master. The sound of gentle rain mixed with the soft ticking of the clock on the wall, each tick a reminder of time passing, of moments being cherished or lost. I glanced at Oliver, whose serene presence grounded me in the here and now. I remembered the days when I felt trapped in my old routine, the endless cycle of tasks that left me yearning for something more. It was as if I had been walking around wearing a heavy coat on a warm day. I could feel the weight of my own expectations pressing down on me, stifling the joy I once felt. I set my mug down and picked up a slice of bread, its golden crust still warm. The texture was rich and comforting against my tongue, and I smiled at how simple pleasures could lift my spirits. The decision I had made wasn't only about leaving a job. It was about reclaiming my space, my time, and my happiness. And yet, there was a part of me that felt hesitant. What would come next? The uncertainty loomed like a cloud overhead, but for now, I took a breath and allowed myself to sit with that unease. Perhaps this was all part of my growth, a necessary step toward rediscovering who I was outside of the roles I had inhabited for too long. Outside, the rain continued its gentle symphony, and I lost myself in that rhythm, each drop a reminder that things could wash away, that renewal was possible. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the wood pressing against my back, its firmness a comforting contrast to the softness of the moment. I closed my eyes for a heartbeat or two, letting my thoughts drift like leaves carried on the breeze, surrendering to the quiet. As the rain slowed to a soft patter, I found myself thinking about the conversations I had had with my friends about this decision. They had responded with kindness, their voices like a warm blanket wrapping around me. I could still hear Jess's light laugh as she said, "You've got to do what makes you happy. There's a whole world outside that job." Her words floated in the air like dandelion seeds, full of potential and blossoming possibilities. For a long time, I had been so focused on what I should be doing that I had neglected what I wanted to do. I felt a small smile spreading across my face, a quiet acknowledgement of the realization that growth didn't have to be big, bold, or brash. Instead, it could be tender, the way a flower unfurls in the spring warmth, the way a bird learns to take flight for the first time. Growth could be as simple as rediscovering the things that spark joy, like feeling the soft texture of yarn between my fingers again, or finding a new recipe to experiment with. I had allowed the layers of my own expectations to smother those passions, but perhaps now I could peel them back, one by one. I picked up the mug once more, the cool ceramic contrasting against my still warm hands, and took another sip of tea. The flavors enveloped me, soothing my mind, and I let the warmth radiate inside me, filling any remaining doubts with a sense of calm. I thought about the next steps, how it didn't have to be rushed. Perhaps I could take my time in exploring what lay ahead. There was a world of possibilities waiting just beyond my front door, and I could venture out at my own pace, exploring each path as it unfolded before me. In the quiet of my little kitchen, I let my mind wander to what I might discover. Maybe I would take a class at the local community center, where laughter and creativity mingled in the air like summer blossoms swirling in the breeze. Perhaps I would reignite my love for painting, splashing colors onto a canvas as freely as the rain danced on the window. I could even spend more time in my garden, where the flowers seemed to grow just as freely as I could allow myself to. Each thought was a seed, waiting for the right moment to take root. As the hours passed and the rain began to dwindle, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction settling in my heart. I had made a choice, not out of haste, but with careful consideration for my own well-being. I had chosen to embrace the uncertainty, the quiet beauty of allowing myself to be a little lost, for that was often the precursor to finding oneself again. All around me, the world was still, and I felt a sense of belonging right where I was. The clock chimed softly, the final sound of the day echoing gently in the air. I glanced over at Oliver, who had shifted positions in his slumber, his little paws twitching as if dancing in a dream. I let out a small chuckle, imagining the adventures he was having in his own world of cat dreams, far removed from my own. In that shared tranquility, I realized that each of us was on our journey, a path often unshared, yet equally significant. I took one last sip, savoring the final notes of chamomile before setting my mug down. The kitchen felt like a warm cocoon, and I wrapped my arms around myself, my heart lighter than it had been in a long while. It struck me how peace could be found in the most ordinary moments. In bread baking, in the sound of rain, in the choice to embrace change. With Oliver still purring softly nearby, a wave of contentment washed over me, and I let my eyelids grow heavy. In that fading light, I welcomed the quiet stillness of the evening, knowing that whatever came next would unfold in its own time. The world outside was alive with possibility, but for now, I was exactly where I needed to be. As my breathing slowed and the last remnants of the day slipped away, I felt like I was drifting into a slumber filled with dreams of lightness and hope. A soft exhale as I finally let go. And now, our next story. The smell of freshly baked bread filled the warm kitchen as I leaned against the counter, my fingers grazing the cool marble surface. The early afternoon sunlight streamed through the window, casting gentle patterns on the floor, and outside the lilac bushes were bursting with purple blooms, their sweet fragrance wafting in with the soft breeze. I could hear the faint sound of birds chirping and the distant rumble of a lawnmower, creating a comforting backdrop to the scene unfolding in my family's kitchen. It was a Saturday, one of those days that felt almost suspended in time, where the hours lazily drifted from one to the next. I remembered fondly how my mother had always taken great joy in baking on weekends, filling the house with aromas that clung to the walls like beloved memories. My brother, Ethan, and I would often hover by her side, hoping for warm slices straight from the oven, topped with generous pats of butter that would melt instantly. Today, I had taken on the role of the occasional sous chef, mainly to keep her company as flour dusted the air like confetti. The kitchen was a bit cluttered. There were mixing bowls piled high on the counter, measuring cups that had seen better days, and a worn cookbook open to a page featuring her famous rosemary bread. As I watched her knead the dough, her hands moving rhythmically, an unexpected wave of nostalgia washed over me, tugging gently at my heart. I had not always felt at home here, and neither had Ethan. The years had taken their toll, weaving misunderstandings and distance into our once close family fabric. It was during one of our childhood arguments over a toy or a misplaced remote, I could hardly recall, that we began to drift apart. Our childish frustrations evolved, growing into deeper rifts filled with unspoken words and unresolved feelings as we aged. As adults, we had become more like distant acquaintances, greeting each other at holiday dinners with polite smiles and nervous laughter. But today felt different. I could sense that something was about to shift in a way I had longed for but hadn't quite dared to hope. "Do you think Ethan will show up?" my mother asked, pressing the dough into a loaf shape with concentration. I caught a glimpse of her brow furrowed slightly, a sign of her own underlying worry. I shrugged gently, my gaze drifting toward the window as I thought of my brother. He'd been working late shifts, consumed by the demands of his job, and it had become too easy to let time slip away without so much as a phone call between us. I hope so. It would be nice to have him here. And he. She nodded, her eyes reflecting both hope and a trace of anxiety, and I wondered if she was imagining the same things I was. Long-forgotten laughter, games in the backyard, and the easy way we used to share everything without reservation. The minutes stretched on as we continued to prepare the meal, the dough rising slowly in a kitchen warmed by memories. I watched her as she hummed softly to herself, the tune a melody from her childhood. It wrapped around us like a warm shawl, and I found myself smiling at how effortlessly she brought light into the room. With each passing moment, my wish for reconciliation between my brother and me grew stronger, fluttering in my chest like a restless bird searching for a way out. Then, just as the oven timer chimed, the subtle sound of a car engine rolled into the driveway. My heart gave a little leap, and I glanced at my mother, who turned to me with wide eyes. She placed her hands on the countertop, her fingers gripping it slightly as we both waited, breaths held. The soft crunch of gravel underfoot announced his arrival, and in that instant, I thought about all those years lost, the laughter stolen by misunderstandings and silence. Ethan stepped over the threshold, his expression a mix of surprise and warmth, the kind of warmth that felt both new and familiar. "I hope I'm not too late for the bread," he said, that crooked smile lighting up his face as it always had. I laughed lightly, the sound bubbling up without pretense, an unguarded reflex that spilled into the air. "Just in time," I replied, and there was a breath of relief that filled the room, as if a weight had been gently lifted from our shoulders. As my mother waved him in, she began setting the table with the ease of someone who has done it 1,000 times. But this time, her movements held a delicate kind of hope. The kitchen, once a place of quiet tension, was now alive with the sounds of clinking silverware and the fragrance of melting butter. We settled at the table, 3 plates drawn together like pieces of a puzzle that had been missing for too long. We started with small talk, light and easy, reminiscing about mundane things like the weather and our favorite shows. For a moment, I felt as if we had turned back the clock, filling the air with the warmth of shared memories. Then, in a soft voice, Ethan surprised us both. "Remember that time we tried to build a treehouse and it collapsed?" I chuckled, nodding while my mother's laughter joined ours, bright and genuine, her eyes brimming with nostalgia. "And your father ended up stuck in the branches," she added, and we all laughed heartily, the sound wrapping around us like a comforting embrace. For a moment, the laughter seemed to float above the table, as if giving us the grace of forgetting the weight of the years that had pulled us apart. There was something precious about that memory, something that reminded us all that we were still capable of joy, even amidst the distance. As the bread was sliced, its crust warm and buttery, it was as if the very act of sharing that steaming loaf was a bridge being rebuilt between us. We leaned back in our chairs, savoring the moment, and I made a silent wish that this would not just be an isolated afternoon, but the beginning of something new, something we could revisit again and again. Conversations began to deepen, though they remained gentle. We spoke of aspirations, dreams we had shelved but still held close to our hearts. Ethan revealed plans for a small photography exhibition he had considered for so long, but never pursued, and my mother excitedly shared her newfound love for painting. I found myself opening up about my own gentle nudges toward writing, my words spilling out like the warm bread before us, each one punctuated with laughter and surprise. Time slowed, and the shadows lengthened outside as the sun dipped lower in the sky. I felt a tremendous sense of peace settle in my chest, an understanding that perhaps reconciling the past never meant forgetting it. It meant weaving it into the present with kindness and compassion. I stole glimpses at my mother, watching her sit back as her hands cradled her coffee cup, a content smile resting on her lips. I saw Ethan leaning forward, animatedly sharing a story, and for the first time in a long while, I felt the delicately woven threads of connection begin to stitch us back together. The bread had long since been devoured, and as the last crumbs were swept away, the conversations grew softer, a mellowness hanging in the air like the scent of fresh flowers. The kitchen glowed in the soft light of the overhead lamp, warm and inviting, and it felt as if we had created a little bubble, a safe harbor in which to explore each other's hearts without fear. As the chatter ebbed, fatigue slowly began to creep in, our voices matching the cozy, peaceful atmosphere around us. Eventually, Ethan leaned back in his chair, a contented sigh escaping his lips. "I really missed this," he admitted, gaze drifting to our mother, who nodded softly in agreement. In that moment, I felt gratitude swell within me, a quiet acknowledgement of how far we had journeyed, from silence and distance to laughter and warmth. I realized that while our past was stitched with complexities, we had built anew upon it, layer by layer, in the most simple yet profound of moments. As the evening deepened, my mother suggested we wrap up for the night, fatigue clinging to her eyes. I glanced at the clock and noted how the stars had begun to twinkle outside our window, a soft wink from the universe. I helped clear the table, our movements easy and unhurried, and with the gentle rhythm of family settling back into itself, I felt a deep sense of calm enveloping us. With everything put away and the dishes washed, we retreated to the living room, where a cozy blanket beckoned. We settled onto the couch, Ethan leaning back with a satisfied smile, while I took a deep breath. The warmth from the day lingered in the room, and as night wrapped itself around us, my heart brimmed with hope for the future. I glanced at my mother, who was slowly closing her eyes, the tranquility of the evening embracing her. I felt the gentle pull of sleep beginning to wrap around me too, like a warm blanket. Outside, the soft sounds of the night began to weave their lullaby. The rustling leaves, the distant chirping of crickets, a gentle reminder that peace had returned. The world felt right, manageable, and as I surrendered to the stillness, I knew that this evening marked the beginning of new connections, gentle reconciliations woven into the fabric of our lives. I closed my eyes, letting the warmth of the moment settle around me, as sleep began to pull me under, a soft whisper promising that all would be well. Here is another story to drift off to. The sun was just beginning to dip below the horizon, casting a warm golden hue over the small, unassuming town of Willow Creek. I stood in my kitchen, the soft clinks of dishes providing a comforting backdrop to my thoughts as I prepared dinner. The gentle hum of the refrigerator filled the room, mingling with the smell of herbs and garlic, a pleasant reminder of Saturday evenings that often drifted into laughter and good food. The walls, painted a soft sage green, enveloped me like a warm hug, and a faint breeze slipped through the open window, bringing with it the scent of blooming lilacs from the garden outside. I could hear distant sounds, a child's joyful laughter, the rustling of leaves stirred by the wind, and the low murmur of neighbors chatting over fences. It was an ordinary evening, but one that settled firmly on the edges of my memory as a cherished moment. As I stirred the bubbling pot of pasta on the stove, my mind wandered to the day I had just experienced at the office. It felt like a lifetime ago, though it had truly been just hours since I had clocked out. I could almost see the fluorescent lights flickering above the cubicles, hear the faint tapping of fingers on keyboards, and feel the weight of the day pressing on my shoulders. But unlike the usual humdrum, an unexpected stir brought a subtle change to my office routine. My workplace had its own rhythm, filled with the comforting familiarity of routine meetings and polite chatter. But it was also tinged with an undercurrent of unspoken tensions. I remembered the way Janice, our project lead, had that morning arrived with her usual briskness, her heels clicking sharply against the tile floor, a sound that struck like a metronome setting the pace for the day. She had an air of authority that commanded attention, but also a way of making everyone feel slightly small. The morning unfolded with tasks tumbling onto our desks, emails pinging like clockwork. But then there was the moment that seemed to freeze time. My colleague Simon, a soft-spoken guy with an endearing way of doubling over in laughter, had been assigned to present our team's findings during a mid-morning meeting. I remember how he had prepared meticulously, cross-referencing data points, adjusting slides, and rehearsing his speech in front of a few of us throughout the week, his face a mixture of nervousness and hopeful excitement. As he stood up to speak, the room filled with a quiet anticipation. We all turned our attention to him, and I could see the flicker of determination in his eyes. But there was something lurking in the background, like a shadow creeping across the sun. Janice had chosen that moment to interrupt him. Her voice was cool, as she pointed out discrepancies in his data, not just mildly, but with an intensity that left him visibly deflated. The sharp edge of her critique cut deep. I could see him struggle to reconcile his hard work with her sudden disapproval, which hung in the air like a heavy fog, suffocating and constraining. As I continued to cook that evening, stirring the pasta and letting it swirl in the sauce, the memory of Simon's face lingered in my thoughts. It gnawed at me, the way Janice had wielded her authority with such relish, as if she thrived on keeping us all a step below her. It seemed to be a pattern, her sharp criticism often overshadowing our accomplishments, leaving our collective morale feeling as withered as the wilting plants lining the office windowsill. Somehow, in that quiet evening, a determination bloomed within me like an unexpected blossom. I thought of how often we brushed these moments aside, too hesitant to voice our irritation or disappointment. I recalled the lunch break a few days prior, when a few colleagues had gathered to share our frustrations. It was a light-hearted conversation at first, but then it turned serious, and we began to recognize the recurring theme: Janice's tendency to undermine. It struck me then. This was not just about Simon. It was about creating a space where we could celebrate our work without the shadow of belittlement looming above. As the pasta simmered softly, I began to formulate a plan, a way we could gently challenge the status quo. Perhaps we could brainstorm together, encouraging one another to share our successes. And if it came to it, speak up when Janice crossed the line. I realized there was a larger conversation to be had, one that could shift the dynamics within our small team, one that would foster a sense of belonging and unity. The next week unfurled slowly, the colors of autumn brushing through the trees outside my window. Meetings continued in their usual cadence, yet the air felt different, charged with a subtle energy of change. We began to gather, a small group committed to lifting one another up, sharing our victories in those quiet moments over coffee breaks, or even through cheerful emails highlighting a colleague's contribution. We practiced positivity as if it were a secret spell, a charm we could cast against the harshness of Janice's critiques. One afternoon, as the leaves danced outside, Simon approached me. His bright eyes glimmered with gratitude, a flicker of hope. "I'd like to present again," he said, his voice steady but low. This time with our team behind me. I felt warmth fill my chest at the thought of solidarity weaving through our group. We all gathered around, offering tips and encouragement, the spirit of camaraderie blossoming like vibrant sunflowers reaching for the sky. The day finally arrived when Simon took the floor again. He stood tall, a subtle confidence radiating from him as he presented our findings once more. The room held its breath, Janice's usual sharp gaze fixated on him, but this time her edge seemed dulled, rounded by the support surrounding him. As he spoke, I recalled the countless hours we had spent together, framing his narrative, supporting each other like roots intertwined beneath the surface. And then, something remarkable happened. Simon finished his presentation, and instead of cutting in with her usual critiques, Janice hesitated. I could see her struggling to keep her composure, to find that familiar sharpness in her words. Perhaps the energy in the room had shifted. Perhaps the warmth of encouragement cast a long shadow on her icy demeanor. "Well done, Simon," she said, the words almost emerging as a surprised whisper. In that moment, I felt relief wash over me like a gentle tide. I saw the glimmer of realization in Simon's eyes, the recognition that he was no longer alone in facing her. The phrases of support we had shared with one another echoed in our minds, weaving through the atmosphere like a soothing balm. From that day onward, our team began to shift, a subtle transformation that fostered kindness, understanding, and growth. Standing in my kitchen, I reflected on that day, on how small changes could ripple through a community, softening hard edges like the gentle caress of the breeze. The aroma of dinner wafted through the house, the pasta perfectly cooked, waiting to be served. I let those thoughts settle comfortably in my heart, feeling grateful for the bonds we'd created, for the quiet strength that had emerged from simple, everyday connections. As the sky outside dimmed and shadows lengthened, I found myself feeling anchored in this moment, aware of the beauty of camaraderie forged through kindness. I savored it, letting the warmth of those memories wrap around me as I turned off the stove, pouring the pasta onto a plate with a soft clatter. In the stillness that followed, I felt grateful, watching the last traces of daylight vanish from the window. A soft blanket of twilight enveloping my home. I settled into my chair, the contentment of a simple meal ahead and a heart full of connections, gently folding into the rhythm of the evening. The world outside was quieting down. My heart mirrored that stillness, a sought-after peace. I closed my eyes briefly, listening to the soft sounds of the evening. A gentle breeze rustling the leaves, the distant murmur of neighbors, and the quiet whispers of gratitude that filled the air. It felt like a soft landing, a reminder that sometimes, even in the most ordinary days, we can find extraordinary moments of connection. And just like that, I let the day slip away, cradled in the warmth of my thoughts as I drifted off into a peaceful slumber. Take a deep breath, and let's move on to the next one. I often think back to that little neighborhood we lived in, where the houses were all painted distinct bright colors, yellows, blues, and soft greens, like a child's box of crayons spread across the street. The mornings were particularly comforting. Each day began with the sun squeezing through the lace curtains of my kitchen window, casting delicate patterns on the table. The scent of coffee would curl through the air, mingling with the buttery aroma of toast, creating a warm invitation to sit down and enjoy the stillness. It was that sort of morning, crisp yet gentle, when I noticed the first hint of autumn turning the leaves to gold and crimson. I could see Monty, my neighbor across the street, standing on his porch, scratching his head, looking at something in his yard. He was an older gentleman with a kind crease at the corners of his mouth, and a laugh that could brighten the cloudiest of days. I poured a steaming cup of coffee into my favorite chipped mug, took a deep breath, and stepped onto the porch, curious about what had captured his attention. "Good morning, Monty. Everything all right?" I called out, my voice weaving through the morning air like a soft breeze. Monty turned, his eyes crinkling with that familiar warmth. Good morning. I'm just trying to figure out how to clear this old tree stump. It's been sitting here for ages, but I keep putting off dealing with it." He sighed, wiping a hand across his brow, the day already beginning to warm up. I leaned against the wooden railing, feeling the coolness of the morning seep into my bones. "It does seem like quite the task," I replied, noticing how his shoulders slumped a little. The weight of that stump pressing down on his spirit. "Maybe we could organize a little neighborhood gathering? I'm sure a few of us would be happy to lend a hand." "None." Monty chuckled, a light-hearted sound that spiraled upward. "You think so? I'd hate to put anyone out." Nonsense," I replied, feeling that familiar glow of neighborly camaraderie wrap around me. "I think everyone would love the excuse to come together. Plus, there might be cookies involved." Dining. The mention of cookies had a magical effect. I could almost hear the wheels turning in Monty's mind. His eyes brightened. The idea of sharing something sweet and lightening his load seemed to ease the burden he felt. "All right, then. Let's make it a potluck. I'll roast a chicken, and we can all pitch in something." Nah. Money. As we began chatting about the details, my heart swelled at the thought of people gathering, laughter echoing, and the sweet smell of food mingling under the golden aura of autumn. A few hours later, I sent out a text to the neighbors, a simple invitation, nothing too fancy, just the promise of good food and good company that would help us all feel a little lighter. The days rolled by, each one steadily growing closer to the gathering. I watched as folks brought forth their contributions, their smiles and chats drifting through the neighborhood like the scent of bread baking in an oven. Ms. Greeley brought her famous macaroni and cheese, creamy and gooey, its cheesy aroma layered with nostalgia. Young Sam from down the street happily volunteered to bring his mom's secret chocolate chip cookies, the kind that always vanished before the day was done. As the day approached, the anticipation built, not just for the food, but for the warmth of community. I could already picture the colorful picnic blankets laid out on the grass, The way laughter would float through the air, punctuated by the crisp rustling of leaves drifting from the trees. Finally, the afternoon arrived, and the sun hung lazily at the horizon, casting golden ribbons of light through the trees. People trickled in, each one greeted with warm smiles and light-hearted exchanges. I could see Monty over by the old barbecue, flipping chicken with an expert hand, releasing bursts of savory scents that danced on the breeze. We all settled down on a patch of grass, the sun painting everything with a soft glow. I took a moment to gaze around, observing the way old friends mingled and how new faces smiled at each other. It felt almost magical, the bond that seemed to tether us all together. Conversations flowed and stories were shared, some silly, some heartfelt, and all sprinkled with laughter. And then there was a quiet moment when the chatter quieted, and Monty stood up. "I just wanted to say thank you," he began, his voice steady but warm. "It's so lovely to have all of you here today. This old stump has been a bit of a nuisance, but seeing all of you come together like this, well, it's made me realize the real beauty in our little neighborhood. It's not the stump that matters, but the warmth we can share." Moon. A few chuckles rippled through the group, and Monty grinned, a little shyly, before settling back down. My heart felt full, the simple joy of connection wrapping around me like a cozy blanket as we dug into our meals, delighting in each other's company. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky in hues of lavender and rose, we gathered around to tackle the stump. Each one of us took turns, finding little bits of joy in the effort as we dug and pulled together. It felt like a sweet reminder that sometimes it's the simplest of tasks that pull a community closer, weaving invisible threads of connection between us. We finally managed to uproot it, and amidst the laughter and cheering, Monty laughed the heartiest laugh I'd ever heard. "Well, that was easier than I thought," he exclaimed, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief, and the sound of our mirth felt like music on a warm evening. The gathering wound down as dusk settled in, filling the air with a gentle stillness. People began to say their goodbyes, leaving behind a trail of smiles and promise of another gathering soon. As I stepped back into my home, the warmth of the day lingered within me, a soothing balm that wrapped around my heart. I switched on a lamp in my cozy living room, its soft glow bringing the shadows to life. The stillness of the night welcomed me as I sank into the comfort of my favorite chair, gazing out the window. Beyond, the stars twinkled like little bits of joy scattered across a vast velvet canvas, sending a soft sigh through my soul. The neighborhood felt like a quilt stitched together by shared moments and kindness, creating a space where laughter could bloom effortlessly. I closed my eyes, savoring the stillness, grateful for the gentle reminders that in the heart of everyday life, we often discover the truest connections, the kind that soothe the spirit and whisper, "Everything is all right." And as I drifted deeper into that comforting embrace of quietude, I could still hear the echo of laughter, the warmth of community twinkling softly like stars illuminating the night sky. It was a beautiful, gentle reminder to hold close, to cherish, and to welcome moments that bind us, all while drifting softly into dreams. And now, our next story. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm golden glow across the office as I sat at my desk, surrounded by the familiar hum of the afternoon lull. The light filtered through dusty blinds, creating striped patterns on my keyboard, while the scent of freshly brewed coffee wafted from the break room down the hall. I could hear the soft murmur of conversations mingling with the clicking of keyboards, punctuated occasionally by laughter from a nearby team that always seemed to be in good spirits. It was a typical Tuesday, the sort of day that promised the comfort of routine. As I sipped my coffee, still a tad too hot for my liking, I glanced around the room. My coworkers each appeared absorbed in their work. Yet there was an underlying sense of community that made the space feel safe and welcoming. I found myself smiling a little as I caught sight of Elaine, the cheerful graphic designer with the bright red glasses. She was in the middle of a video call, animatedly gesturing as she spoke to a client, her laughter bursting through the muted ambience like sunshine breaking through a cloud. It made me think of how her infectious spirit had a way of lifting the mood, no matter how monotonous the day. Across the room, Tom hunched over his desk, his brow furrowed in concentration. He was our resident data analyst, someone whose meticulous attention to detail had garnered a reputation for brilliance. He often kept to himself, yet there was something endearing about his quiet dedication. I had noticed that he had been slightly less engaged in the team meetings lately. His usual light-hearted jokes and banter had dwindled, replaced by thoughtful silence. I couldn't help but wonder if something was bothering him, though every time I tried to bring it up, he would simply smile and assure me he was fine. On this particular afternoon, as the shadows stretched longer and the clock ticked closer to 5, a little knot of worry nestled in my chest. I had a nagging sense that something was amiss, but as I turned back to my own work, I pushed the feeling aside, focusing on meeting my deadlines instead. Yet I could feel a gentle tug of curiosity. Perhaps I could check in with Tom later, see if he wanted to join me for coffee during our break. The hours slipped by, and soon it was time for our afternoon respite. I grabbed my half-empty cup and wandered over to the break room, where a warm breeze flowed through the open window, stirring the crisp papers on the counter. The chatter of my coworkers filled the air, creating a symphony of familiar voices and laughter. I filled my cup again and settled into the corner couch, not far from where Tom sat, hunched and focused on his own drink. "Hey, Tom," I said, my voice gentle against the backdrop of bustling sounds. "Want to join me over here?" He looked up, a flicker of surprise crossing his features, then nodded. "Sure. Just finishing up a few things." He took a sip of his coffee, a hint of steam curling upwards, and shifted his gaze towards the window. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, and I watched as the clouds drifted lazily across the sky, their shapes shifting and morphing, almost like the conversations we had on good days. I took another sip of coffee, feeling the warmth spread through me, and then, summoning a bit of courage, I leaned a bit closer. "You've seemed a little off lately," I said softly. "Everything okay?" Tom hesitated, his fingers tapping lightly against the ceramic mug. "I guess. I just have a lot on my mind." He paused, glancing out the window as if searching for the right words. "It's nothing serious. Just, I don't know, feeling the pressure of everything. Work's been hectic, and I worry if I'm really keeping up." "Nay." His admission was quiet, almost as if he were sharing a secret. I nodded, understanding flooding through me. "I think we all feel that way sometimes," I replied, my voice steady and warm. "Especially when deadlines loom closer. But you do an incredible job. We all appreciate you, you know?" "Not now." He smiled faintly, and for a moment I felt a ripple of relief wash over me. It was easy to forget sometimes how the unassuming presence of our team members could affect the overall atmosphere. I leaned back against the couch, letting the comfort of the moment settle around us. "I just keep thinking about how I can improve my work, contribute more," he said, his voice low. "I guess I hold myself to high standards." "It's good to want to improve," I replied, warming to the conversation. "But it's also okay to take a breather. We're all in this together, right? No need to bear the weight alone." I gestured toward the lively discussions happening around us, a quiet reminder of the camaraderie that filled our workplace. Tom chuckled softly, his tension easing just a little. "You're right," he conceded, a hint of a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "I suppose I just need to remember that." We spent a few more moments in quiet companionship. As we sipped our coffees, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. The simple act of sharing space, of chatting about the mundane and the everyday, felt grounding. Tom shifted slightly, stretching his arms overhead as if to shake off lingering worries. And in that small gesture, I felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps opening up, however small, was all it took to find the light again. When it was time to return to our desks, I sensed a lighter atmosphere between us. I couldn't tell if it was the coffee, the comforting nature of our surroundings, or simply the gentle reassurance that comes from sharing moments with a friend, but I felt grateful. As we parted ways, I claimed a little smile for myself, knowing that every small connection we made contributed to the warmth of our everyday lives. The evening rolled in gradually, casting a soft lavender hue through the office as it transformed into a canvas of twilight. I allowed myself to drift back into my tasks, feeling buoyed by the small conversations we had shared. My mind wandered to thoughts of how often we underestimated the power of simple words, casual concerns. In the end, sometimes it's those tiny moments, like a shared cup of coffee during a busy workday, that knit the fabric of our connection. The hours stretched just a bit longer as I wrapped up the remaining tasks. Outside, the world began to surrender to quietness, the streetlights flickering softly as the first stars peeked out from the canopy of night. As I finally closed my laptop and prepared to leave, I felt that familiar sense of contentment settle in, a warmth that came from knowing we were all part of something larger. With one last glance at the office, I took a deep breath and stepped outside, where the cool night air kissed my cheeks. I could hear the distant sound of laughter from a nearby cafe and feel the pulse of life beyond this small haven we called work. I turned toward my car, the soft hum of my surroundings beginning to lull me into a state of ease. As I drove home, the gentle rhythm of the engine served as a comforting reminder of another day well spent. Arriving home, I let out a long breath, shaking off the day like a warm blanket. The lights were dimmed, and the comforting hush of my familiar space wrapped around me. I nested into my favorite chair, pulling a soft throw blanket over my lap, and took a moment to simply breathe. The world outside became a symphony of soft whispers, the rustling leaves, and an occasional car passing by, all melding into a soothing backdrop. I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the connections made, for the shared vulnerability, and for the moments that felt so beautifully ordinary yet so significant. As I sat there, the calmness settled deeper, my eyelids growing heavy, with the rich scent of coffee still lingering gently in the air, and the warmth of understanding clinging to my heart. I allowed myself to drift away into the beautiful embrace of soft sleep, secure in the knowledge that in this world, we wept, are never truly alone. Close your eyes and settle in for this one. The morning light filtered gently through the sheer curtains of my kitchen, casting soft golden patterns across the table. I could smell the rich aroma of brewing coffee, mingling with the faint sweetness of last night's apple pie cooling on the counter. The world outside my window was waking up slowly, birds chirping with their usual morning enthusiasm, while a light breeze rustled the leaves of the trees lining the street. I stood at the counter, my fingers brushing against the smooth porcelain of my favorite mug, which was adorned with tiny blue flowers. I poured the steaming coffee into it, wincing slightly as the hot liquid splashed against my fingers. I still hadn't quite mastered the art of pouring without the occasional burn. I chuckled to myself, imagining how my mother would have teased me about it. "You're such a klutz, darling," she would have said with a warm smile, her laughter echoing in the cozy corners of our home. As I took my first sip, the bittersweet warmth filled me, and my gaze drifted to the old oak tree outside. Its branches were heavy with green leaves, a testament to many seasons gone by. I could almost see the little swings we had hung there when my sister and I were children, the ropes now frayed and twisted but still whispering stories of laughter and carefree days. Today, though, was different. Today held a hint of melancholy wrapped in warm nostalgia. I was preparing for a small gathering, a farewell party for my sister, Lucy, who had decided to move to another city for a new job. While I was thrilled for her, a part of me clung to the thought of her leaving as if it were a sudden chill in the air that one could not ignore. I moved through the familiar routine of arranging the small dining table, placing mismatched plates and silverware that had been collected over the years, each telling a different story. I chose to set the table with the bright yellow napkins, the ones Lucy always insisted made any meal feel like a celebration. As I continued to prepare, I remembered the countless meals we had shared in this space, our laughter bouncing off the walls, the exchange of playful banter that transformed even the most ordinary dinners into cherished memories. While I worked, I could almost hear her voice, teasing and sweet. "You really should consider a career in interior design," she'd joke, eyeing my artistic attempts to arrange the table. Eventually, the doorbell rang, startling me out of my reverie, and I knew it was Lucy. I opened the door to find her standing there, arms wide open. Her laughter was bright and infectious, as it always had been. "Guess who's here to help?" she announced, her smile wide enough to light up the dim hallway. Together, we slid into our routine, chopping vegetables and mixing ingredients, the kitchen filling with laughter and the scent of something rich and savory bubbling on the stove. I watched her as she moved about, her hands deftly tossing salad greens, her hair swept back in a messy bun, a few strands escaping to frame her face. I marveled at how she made even the simplest tasks look effortless, her joy palpable in every slice of cucumber and sprinkle of seasoning. As we worked side by side, I felt a familiar warmth growing in my chest, but beneath it lurked a quiet sadness, a realization that each moment we shared today was a farewell wrapped in layers of joy. "Remember when we made that disaster of a cake for Mom's birthday?" I asked, trying to steer the conversation toward lighter memories. She laughed, her eyes shining. "How could I forget? We used salt instead of sugar." I thought she was going to choke. We both burst into laughter, the sound mingling with the bubbling of the pot and the soft crackle of the oven. As we sat down at the table, the food before us was a tapestry of colors, reflecting our shared effort and love. The gathering was small but filled with warmth, just a few friends and family who had come to celebrate Lucy. As the night deepened, the conversation flowed freely, mingled with stories, and laughter hung in the air, light and buoyant. But as the evening wore on, I began to notice the fleeting glances toward the door, the way conversations occasionally faltered, punctuated by unspoken thoughts of tomorrow. I caught Lucy's gaze more than once, and in those moments, I could sense the bittersweet undercurrent of her impending departure. Later, when the last of the guests had left, Lucy and I found ourselves standing in the kitchen, the remnants of our celebration scattered around us. I looked at her, my heart heavy yet full, filled with gratitude for the time we had shared. "You know, it's not just about you leaving," I admitted softly. "It's a little scary, thinking about what life will be like without our regular catch-ups." Lucy smiled gently, her fingers brushing against my arm. "I know, but we'll always have our memories, right? Plus, we can always FaceTime. And I promised to send ridiculous updates." "Nine." I chuckled, imagining her sending me pictures of her new life, the adventures she would embark on, the new friends she would make, and all the new experiences waiting just around the corner. "And I'll start collecting ridiculous stories to tell you," I teased, my heart warming at the thought of our future conversations, even if they would be different. As we tidied up the final mess, I found myself lingering on the moments we had left together. There was a comfort in the rhythm of washing dishes side by side, the sound of water splashing, and the clinking of silverware as we shared quiet thoughts about our evening. "Do you remember that old oak tree?" I asked, my voice quiet. "The one in the backyard." A soft smile crossed her face. "How could I forget? It's always been our secret spot." "No." "Do you think it will look different when you come back?" I asked, unable to shake the feeling that so much would change. "Well, I hope it's still there," she said, her tone playful yet reflective. "But I think it'll keep on standing strong just like us, no matter how far apart we are." "No." The thought settled warmly in my heart. It was true, change was part of life. But that didn't mean we had to lose what we had built together. The oak tree would remain, steadfast and strong, just like our bond, waiting patiently for her return, and for more shared laughs under its branches. As the evening wound down, I felt the familiar sense of peace creeping in, mingled with the bittersweet pang of letting go. I leaned against the kitchen counter, watching Lucy as she finished drying the last of the dishes. There was something calming about the warmth of the kitchen at night, the soft glow of the lights against the walls painting a comforting picture. "I'm going to miss this," I whispered, the simple truth hanging in the air like a soft blanket. "Me too," she said, putting the dishcloth down and wrapping her arms around me in a warm embrace, her presence radiating comfort. "But remember, it's not goodbye forever. Just for now." Nandanalayor. The two of us stood there for a moment, cocooned in the familiarity of our shared warmth, a sense of stillness enveloping us, as I realized that it was okay to feel both joy and sadness at the same time. In the bittersweetness, there was room for gratitude. Gratitude for all we had shared and all the memories yet to come. As I finally pulled away from her embrace, I caught a glimpse of the old oak tree standing tall outside, its branches swaying gently in the night breeze. It was a reminder that as seasons changed and paths diverged, there would always be roots connecting us, anchoring us to where we came from. We stepped outside for a moment, the air cool and fresh against our skin. The stars shimmered softly above us, twinkling like tiny diamonds in the vast sky. "Look," Lucy said, pointing up. "The stars are still here, just like us." I smiled, my heart at ease. We stood in silence for a little while, sharing the stillness, both of us lost in our thoughts, waiting for the right moment to let go. Eventually, as the night deepened, we went back inside, lingering for one last chat before sleep. The kitchen was still warm with the echoes of laughter, the memories of the evening wrapping around us like a soft blanket. I felt gratitude wash over me, calm and soothing, the kind that comes from knowing that love doesn't diminish with distance. Later, as I lay in bed, listening to the gentle rhythm of my own breathing, I felt a sense of peace settle in. Lucy was embarking on a new chapter, but there was an assurance in my heart that our paths would cross again. The oak tree would still stand, and so would we, each a part of the other's journey. With that thought drifting softly through my mind, I closed my eyes and surrendered to the stillness, feeling the waves of sleep wash over me gently, as comforting as the memories of love shared and the promise of more to come. The world around me faded away, replaced by the warmth of gratitude and the quiet assurance that life, like the stars, would shine infinitely in the dark. Close your eyes and settle in for this one. The evening light filtered gently through the half-open window, casting a warm glow across my small kitchen. The familiar scent of freshly baked bread lingered in the air, sweet and yeasty, mingling with the faint hint of pine from the wooden cabinets. I had spent the afternoon kneading and shaping dough, the rhythmic motions grounding me in the comforting solitude of my home. The light flickered slightly as the old lamp on the counter, with its soft yellow shade, created cozy pools of illumination around the neat, tiled surface. Outside, the distant sound of laughter echoed from a neighbor's garden, mixed with the rustling leaves of the old oak tree that stood sentinel in my backyard. As I brought the still warm bread to the table, I noticed the familiar ache of my back from bending over the counter. But it was a good ache, the kind that came from creating something with my hands. I poured myself a cup of chamomile tea, the steam curling up like gentle fingers into the air, and settled into the worn armchair that hugged the corner of my kitchen. The chair had once belonged to my grandmother, and I often imagined her sitting there, her knitting needles clicking softly as she spoke in that enchanting way she had, her eyes alight with warmth and mischief. Just as I was about to take a sip, the doorbell rang, the soft, melodic chime echoing through the calmness of the evening. I set my cup down, the warmth of the tea still radiating in my hands, and walked to the door, feeling a flutter of excitement in my chest. It was always nice to have unexpected visitors, especially in the quieter months as autumn rolled in, ushering in a gentle chill and a longing for connection. I opened the door to find my neighbor, Sam, grinning broadly, his hands stuffed into the pockets of his faded green jacket. "Hey there," he exclaimed, a touch of breathlessness in his voice. "I came over to see if you had any flour. I thought I'd whip up some cookies this evening." No, coming, dinamijan. I smiled at him, amused at his enthusiasm. Of course! I just finished baking bread, so there's flour to spare. Come in. Ein. Oh, wait. He shuffled inside, his eyes darting around the kitchen, taking in the warm ambience, the inviting aroma, and the half-sliced loaf resting on the table. Wow, it smells amazing in here. Are those for us? He asked, gesturing at the bread. Well, they could be if you keep that big grin up. I might just share, I chuckled, teasing him as I reached for a knife. Sam's expression shifted slightly to one of mock seriousness. In that case, I'll need to make a worthy offering, he declared, pulling something from his pocket. It was a small jar, and I squinted at the label. Homemade jam, he announced proudly, thrusting the jar toward me. Peach? I asked, tilting my head, but my voice held a touch of uncertainty. I thought I remembered him mentioning making apricot earlier in the week. Absolutely peach, he affirmed, his smile stretching wide. And it's the best batch yet. You'll love it. No, estamos. I nodded, although my mind played with a little concern. My grandmother had always had a special way of making jam, and I worried that Sam's enthusiasm might not quite match her legendary skills, which seemed to exist on an entirely different culinary plane. Still, I opened the jar, intrigued by his confidence. As I reached for the bread, Sam launched into a story about his latest baking adventures, his hands animatedly illustrating each point. I thought the peach jam would mellow out the sweetness of the cookie dough, he said, his excitement bubbling over. But then, I had a small mishap with the measuring cup. Nay. It took a moment for me to catch the slight mischief dancing in his eyes as he spoke. I accidentally put in a whole cup of chili flakes instead of sugar. My laughter filled the kitchen, bubbling over like the pasta pot that had once boiled too enthusiastically on my own stove. Oh no. Was it as fiery as it sounds? Nani. Fire seems to be the theme of my kitchen experiments, he chuckled, shaking his head. I think I had to evacuate the neighborhood. There was a lot of water chugging and coughing among my friends that night. New, unlower. As he spoke, I couldn't help but admire how light-hearted he was about the culinary chaos. It reminded me so much of the friendly banter we often shared about our respective cooking mishaps. And for a moment we lingered in the gentle rhythm of laughter and friendly tales. Then, suddenly, he paused mid-sentence, and his brows furrowed a little, as if a thought had tickled him. Wait, you did save a bit of that loaf for the jam, right? He asked, his tone shifting into mock suspicion. I turned toward the table, the loaf sitting invitingly. Golden crust, still glistening. Oh, yes. It's all yours. My only worry is that you might have set the bar too high for your cookies. Now, not a chance, he declared, puffing out his chest theatrically. But will you make sure to be on hand when I taste them? Just in case. Nine. Of course, my trusty taste tester, I replied, my heart warming at the connection we forged over our little culinary escapades. And yet, in my mind, a tiny misgiving lingered. What if his jam, created in the spirit of adventure, turned out to be too bold beside my delicate loaf? I decided to keep the thought to myself and just enjoy the moment. As we sliced into the bread together, I was surprised at how the crust crumbled perfectly, revealing the soft, warm texture inside. The jam glistened invitingly beside it, the vibrant hue of peach catching the light in such a way that I felt momentarily entranced. He spread some onto a slice, and I watched as he bit into it, waiting for the reaction. A second passed, then another, as he chewed slowly, and a grin spread across his features. It's the perfect balance, he exclaimed, amazed. See? I told you, I'm a genius. There was something infectious in his laughter, and soon I found myself joining in, a bond of shared silliness woven into the very air between us. We continued to chat and joke, drifting between stories of our culinary disasters and the laughable misunderstandings that seemed to punctuate our lives. Every now and then, Sam took another taste of the jam, and each time, his enthusiasm only grew. I could feel my heart lightening in the warm glow of our conversation, the cozy kitchen filled with a soft whir of contentment. At one point, Sam leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful look crossing his face. I love how we can just relax and chat like this. It feels good to be home. He paused, his eyes flickering toward the window where the last hints of daylight seemed to be gently retreating. It's nice to have someone who appreciates the sticky mess of it all. Well, someone has to, right? I replied, a smile tugging at my lips. Otherwise, all this flour would go to waste, and the world would miss your epic chili cookies. As the evening wore on, we shared stories that drifted into silence, another piece of bread disappearing, another scoop of jam shared. The sunlight melted into soft shadows, and the sounds from outside faded away, pulling us deeper into our little world. With the final bites of bread consumed and the jar of jam nearly empty, I felt a sense of gratitude wash over me, not just for the bread or jam or the chaos of the afternoon, but for the simple bond formed in the quiet of shared laughter. "Next week," Sam said as he stood to leave, "I'll bring you some cookies that won't set fire to the kitchen. Balance out my reputation." "Menin?" I couldn't help but shake my head, still smiling. "I'll hold you to that. Just no chili, all right?" "No." As I closed the door behind him and returned to my chair, a gentle sigh escaped me. The evening felt like a snug blanket wrapped around my shoulders. The kettle whistled softly in the background, the remnants of my tea cooling by the window, and I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the calming quiet settle in. Outside, the silver moon began to rise, casting a gentle glow across my kitchen. I could hear the distant echo of laughter still floating on the breeze, the memory of a warm evening lingering like the scent of fresh bread. Everything felt just right, and as I snuggled deeper into my chair, feeling the weight of contentment wash over me, I let the moment wrap around me like a tender embrace. The world was manageable, filled with small joys and the delightful messiness of life. I took a breath, the air sweetening with a hint of peach, and allowed myself to drift into the stillness as the light began to fade. Close your eyes and settle in for this one. It was one of those early autumn evenings when the air carries a hint of Christmas, wrapping around you like a soft, welcoming shawl. I found myself on the front porch of a small cafe, tucked away in a corner of my sleepy town, a familiar little spot where the wooden planks creaked beneath my feet, and the scent of freshly brewed coffee danced through the air. The cafe was dimly lit, its warm golden glow spilling out into the dusk, inviting passers-by to linger just a bit longer. As I sat there cradling a steaming mug of chamomile tea, the warmth seeped into my palms, grounding me. I could hear the distant laughter of a couple sitting at a table nearby, the bubbling sound of their voices weaving in and out like a gentle song. A few leaves brushed against each other in the soft breeze, their edges turning a gentle amber and gold. It was a simple moment, a gathering of the day's whispers, but somehow it felt profound, like the world was settling into a peaceful rhythm after the busyness of summer. I took a sip, the familiar floral notes wrapping around my senses with each gentle gulp. I looked out at our little town, its charm reflected in the soft glow of streetlights flickering to life as the sun dipped lower. People strolled by, some with hands buried in pockets while others cradled warm pastries. I saw a dog wagging its tail enthusiastically at a passing stranger, the joy contagious, even from my distance. I had decided to come here after a long week, one that dragged on like a train chugging slowly through a tunnel. The stress of work had clung to me, like the last remnants of summer's heat. My mind traced back to the moment when I had closed my laptop that Friday evening, feeling the weight of the week slip off my shoulders. I needed a space to breathe, to just be, and this cafe had long been my little sanctuary. As I settled deeper into my chair, I began to notice the little details around me. A faded photograph hung crookedly on the wall behind the counter, featuring the cafe's original owner and his beaming smile. The floor, worn with use, held stories in each creak, inviting memories of countless conversations shared over coffee. The walls, painted a soft olive green, seemed to whisper secrets from years gone by. Tales of friendships blossoming, of love stories beginning, and of the comfort found in shared moments. Suddenly, I heard the bell above the doorframe jingle, announcing the entry of a newcomer. I glanced up and saw an elderly woman stepping inside, her wise eyes twinkling beneath a cozy wool hat. She shuffled to the counter, her movements deliberate yet graceful, as if she had danced with time itself. The barista greeted her with a warm smile, and after a moment of friendly exchange, the woman settled herself at a small table in the corner. I could see the way her fingers traced over the surface of the table, lightly brushing it as if greeting an old friend. I returned my gaze to the street, watching the way the shadows stretched and mingled as twilight deepened. The world outside felt soft and muted, as if wrapped in a calming blanket. Time seemed to pause, allowing me to reflect on small moments, the comforting sip of tea, the laughter wafting through the air, the gentle rhythm of life darting by. Then I noticed the elderly woman. She had dug into her bag and was rifling through its contents. She pulled out a small notebook, worn at the edges, and began to write. Each stroke of her pen appeared to hold a flood of thoughts, a quiet story, unfolding one word at a time. A soft smile crept onto my face, an involuntary reaction to her serene presence. She exuded a warmth that made me want to know her, to understand what memories she was capturing on such delicate pages. As the cafe settled into a comfortable hush, the bell above the door jingled again. A young couple burst in, their cheeks flushed from the cold air outside. They moved with the giddy energy of fresh love, their laughter bright and airy. The woman, with cascading curls and sparkling eyes, caught sight of the old woman and smiled brightly, her kindness radiating like sunlight. She made her way over to the corner, leaving her partner in line, and leaned down, whispering something into the elderly woman's ear. In that moment, I felt a gentle warmth wash over me, as though the kindness that stretched across the room wrapped itself around my shoulders. The old woman's eyes twinkled and she laughed softly, a sound that fluttered like a leaf in the wind. I took another sip of my tea, feeling content and unnoticed. I relished the scene unfolding before me, the layers of connection forming between strangers like a tapestry. The couple sat with her, sharing smiles and gentle anecdotes, while the barista busied himself behind the counter, pouring drinks with a familiar ease. As the minutes drifted by, I could see the young woman digging into her purse, pulling out a slice of cake covered in cream and berries. She placed it gently in front of the old woman, her eyes alight with joy as she said something that made both of them chuckle. It was a small act of kindness, and yet it felt monumental. The way they shared that moment, the spotlight of the cafe shining on their connection, filled the air with a sweetness that lingered long after. Time felt suspended, and I lost myself watching them. It was a reminder of the beauty found in simple gestures, the way a little light in someone's day could spark warmth in the heart. I thought about how often I had rushed past moments like this, caught up in the whirlwind of my own thoughts, forgetting to see the world around me. The young man's laughter broke through my reverie, and I noticed him, now seated with a coffee in hand, sharing his own stories with animated gestures. The old woman leaned in closer, her face lit with curiosity, her hands occasionally emphasizing a point as she connected her own tales with theirs. I could see the joy bubbling among them, laughter mixing with the aroma of coffee, enveloping the cafe in a cozy embrace. As I watched, a feeling of serenity washed over me. I was grateful for this little sanctuary, for the warmth of the connections being formed within its walls. The evening deepened around us, the soft twilight creeping in, and I could feel the gentle pull of sleep at the edges of my awareness. There was a rhythmic quality to the conversations, the soft inflections of voices weaving together like a lullaby that lulled me further into relaxation. Moments seemed to stretch, The clinking of cups became a soothing backdrop, and the light chatter wrapped me in a cocoon of comfort. I noticed the old woman's laughter had grown softer, filled with warmth and appreciation. She looked younger somehow, radiant beneath the soft lights, illuminated by the kindness surrounding her. Eventually, our gazes met for just a brief moment, and I saw a spark of understanding pass between us. She smiled, and in that smile, I felt the weight of all the shared stories and kind acts that had been exchanged in this little cafe over the years. An unspoken connection was forged, one that needed no words. It was a reminder that kindness has a way of cascading through us, touching lives in the most unexpected moments. As the evening wore on, and the afterglow of laughter lingered, I felt my eyelids growing heavy, inviting me to surrender to the comfort of the moment. I took one last sip of my tea, feeling the warmth settle in my belly, like a glowing ember inviting me to find rest. I closed my eyes, surrendering to the coziness of the cafe, the echoes of laughter intertwining with the soft sigh of the wind outside. The world slipped away, and I drifted into a gentle sleep. I remember the feeling of being cradled in warmth, knowing that the connections we forge, however fleeting, have an enduring grace. A soft reminder that kindness is always within reach, waiting to be shared like a slice of cake and feast. Joy of a new friendship. Close your eyes and settle in for this one. I remember one quiet autumn afternoon, sunlight filtering through the leaves, casting playful shadows across the wooden deck of my little house on Pine Street. It was that beautiful time of year when the air was crisp, and the scent of damp earth mingled with the aroma of the freshly baked apple pie cooling on the kitchen counter. The pie had been a spontaneous decision, a welcome comfort, and I could still feel the warmth of the oven radiating against my skin as I took it out, filling the entire room with a sense of home. Outside, I could hear the leaves rustling underfoot as my neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, walked her small, yappy dog, Biscuit, down the street. He had a way of barking at absolutely nothing, which often made me chuckle as I decorated the pie with a sprinkle of cinnamon and a touch of sugar. I could picture Mrs. Thompson in her oversized knitted sweater, her straw hat tipped slightly forward, her laughter intertwining with the sound of Biscuit's energetic barks, a symphony of warmth and autumn. After placing the pie on the windowsill to cool, I grabbed a steaming mug of chamomile tea and settled into my favorite chair, an old but sturdy recliner, with the softest plaid blanket draped across it like a familiar friend. I could hear the gentle rustle of the wind brushing against the window panes, the sun's rays gradually softening as the day slid toward evening. It was the kind of day that flowed slowly, inviting reflection. As I sipped my tea, I let my mind wander. Thoughts drifted to my interactions with Mrs. Thompson. Over the years, she had developed a habit of borrowing my gardening tools and forgetting to return them, which had started as a mild annoyance and had, over time, turned into an ongoing jest. I could still recall the time she borrowed my favorite trowel, only for me to find it sitting, quite indignantly, in her garden among her vibrant marigolds and rosemary. On most days I would chuckle it off, but there was a tiny part of me that longed for a small taste of playful revenge. Nothing hurtful, of course, just a gentle nudge back into the breezy realm of neighborly antics. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and lavender, I felt a mischievous idea bubble up within me. I had recently discovered a few easy recipes for homemade soap, the kind that, when paired with the right scent, had the power to make anyone feel pampered. And since Mrs. Thompson had a fondness for lavender, I decided to craft a batch, laced with an extra dash of honey and, as fate would have it, a rather potent essential oil that would leave a lasting scent on her hands, one not so easily washed away. The process was delightful. I melted the soap base slowly, the warm, sweet scent dancing through the air as I mixed in the lavender essence. I could hear the gentle thump of Biscuit's paws against the wooden deck outside as I worked, a reminder of my initial intention hidden behind a veil of sweet-smelling mischief. By the end of the evening, I'd poured the soap into delicate molds shaped like tiny flowers, and I couldn't help but smile at my creation, nestled in the kitchen corner. It was now time to rest, and I felt a sense of warmth and contentment wash over me, like the aroma of freshly baked goods. The next morning was wrapped in a comforting blanket of fog, the kind that made the world feel a bit softer and a tad more mysterious. I carefully boxed the soap, tying it with a simple twine and slipping a note inside. A little something to brighten your day, Mrs. Thompson. Enjoy. I giggled at the thought of her surprise. As I made my way over to her house, I felt the crisp air bite gently at my cheeks, invigorating yet soothing. With each step, I imagined Mrs. Thompson's reaction, her eyebrows raising in delight, the corners of her mouth turning upwards in a bemused smile. And perhaps, just perhaps, a tiny hint of guilt for all those borrowed tools. When I reached her door, she was just stepping out, her straw hat bouncing lightly with each stride and Biscuit causing a ruckus at her feet. Her expression changed to one of pleasant surprise when she spotted me standing there with the box in hand. "Oh, what's this?" "A surprise from my favorite neighbor," she beamed, her surprise wrapping around us like a warm hug. I handed over the box and she took it gingerly, her eyes crinkling in delight as she opened it. "Oh, lavender. You know me so well. Have you been peeking in my window?" she teased, laughter bubbling between us, filtering through the cool morning air. "No peeking, I promise," I replied with a playful grin. "Just a little something to brighten your day." "Thank you, dear. You're too kind." She laughed, glancing down at Biscuit, who seemingly approved of my gesture with an enthusiastic wag of his tail. As she turned the delicate bar of soap over in her hands, her smile lingered, and I felt a lightness in my chest. "You really didn't have to," she exclaimed, and something about the sound of her gratitude rolled over me like a soft wave. "It's just soap," I shrugged playfully. "Think of it as a thank you for all those gardening tips you've given me over the years." We spent a few moments chatting, recalling the last time we had crossed paths, her inviting me over for one of her infamous tea parties, which mostly consisted of her telling amusing anecdotes while encouraging me to try her latest culinary experiments. Some successful, others, well, let's just say acquired tastes. As our laughter echoed down the street, I caught sight of the glint in her eyes, that unmistakable warmth that comes from camaraderie and shared experiences. In those moments of connection, the mischief faded away, replaced by a simple joy that made the world feel expansive and safe. I left her house, a soft smile on my face, feeling lighter than air. It had been just a small act, a playful return to a series of harmless exchanges, yet it felt profound in its simplicity. A reminder of the little joys that lingered in every day, whether wrapped in a box or shared between neighbors. When I settled back into my chair later that evening, the fading light of day caught the dust motes dancing in the warm glow of the lamp on the table. I watched the shadows stretch across my familiar walls, the sounds of the world outside slowly quieting down into a gentle hush. The blend of chamomile and lavender lingered in the air, a soothing reminder of the kindness that had unfolded. With my blanket pulled snug around my shoulders, I felt gratitude wash over me. In a way, I realized, it wasn't just about the soap or the small acts of petty revenge. And as the last light of day faded away, I listened to the soft sounds of the evening, my heart feeling full and content. The world was manageable, wrapped in kindness, and I let the gentle warmth of sleep wash over me as the cozy blanket settled in for the night. And that's the last story for tonight. You've traveled a long way to get here, through 10 quiet worlds, 10 small lives, 10 gentle resolutions. Your breathing is slower now. Your body is heavy and warm. There's nothing left to think about. Just the quiet. Just the dark. Just rest.